Happy Wisdom Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in and for choosing to spend some of your time with me. I'm Maria Milagros, and this is a little space I like to carve out to share tips, tools, techniques, nuggets, stories, anecdotes that can help you as they have helped me, hopefully us, when we put them into practice, create healthier, happier spaces in our lives, no matter where we are right now in this moment. And I want to clarify that healthier and happier could be 1 degree at a time. It's not necessarily a quantum leap because that's not how any of this works. I wish it was. So we're talking about relationships, and I wanted to start by talking about I started the month by talking about what is the definition of family. And it wasn't so much a nugget as it was a question to really get us to sit and assess, is our family and the spaces that we invest our most precious resources, our time and our energy, are those spaces and people where we have reciprocation, right? Or is it just out of obligation? That's a tweetable. I'm not even on Twitter, but if I was, that's a good thing to post on Twitter. So anyways, this week I want to talk about some of the healthy dynamics and components that exist in healthy relationships. Now, I made a list, and the list is like crazy long, right? And then I started scouring through studies and research and some of my books on relationships, and I realized that we could really have a list of over 100 things that could be healthy qualities of a relationship. We don't have time for 100 things, and it's overwhelming. So I'm going to list for you 10 things and then kind of talk about them a little bit. The bigger question for me when it comes to healthy relationships is that partner in the relationship, be it someone that you're intimate with, and by intimacy, I'm not just talking about sex, I'm talking about vulnerable communication, right? I have intimacy with my best girlfriends, and it's because we are open, we're vulnerable, we talk about things that I don't talk about in other spaces of my life. That's intimate, right? So I don't want you to think of intimacy as just relationships that are about sex, although that is a form of intimacy for sure. So when we're thinking about relationships, I want you to think about your intimate relationships, both sexual and otherwise. I want you to think about your friendships. I want you to think about your coworkers. I want you to think about your relationships and your dynamics with your children or your spouse or your nieces and nephews or cousins or parents or siblings, on and on and on. Think about the relationships as a whole. I don't want you to just think about one relationship in your life, right? Because as much as possible, I found that when we practice the same things in all of the spaces of our lives, we get a greater sense of congruency and confidence about who we are, which then creates more ease in our lives. I don't feel like I have to be a certain person depending on where I go or who I'm with. I'm just going to be me across the board. Now, that being said, if I'm talking to my 4-year-old niece, that conversation is obviously slightly different than if I'm talking to my grown sister or my great-grandmother, right? Just because generationally and because of the dynamic of that relationship and because of what they can or cannot understand at that time in their lives, there's going to be some changes, but who I am is consistent across the board. That's really important. So when we think about healthy relationships, because all relationships begin and end right here, based on how well we invest in, take care of, and honor this relationship, it impacts and influences all of the relationships outside of ourselves. The less we are aware of and in connection with and comfortable with this relationship, the more that we're in connection with and comfortable with this relationship, the more likely we are to be congruent in all the other pockets of our lives. It's when we are not fully connected to our whole selves that we feel like we have to slice off pieces of ourselves to distribute in different pockets of our lives, and that's really exhausting. So when we think about relationships, I want you to think about it here first and then here. So the relationship isn't always about what can my partner bring into this dynamic and do they hit this checklist. But more importantly, and first, am I bringing this into the dynamic, providing this space for my partner, my person that I'm interacting with? Am I doing that first? Before I call anybody out, I got to be willing to check myself, right? So I want you to think about that first and foremost. And then in the dynamics of the relationship, what can your relationship work on, right? Does that relationship need to work on a specific thing in order for it to continue to evolve and grow and become healthier. So here's my list. Here's my top 10. All right, number 1 is honesty. It's my number 1 core value for my job, for the company. It's my number 1 core value for myself as a person. So of course it's going to be number 1 on the top of my list because I'm operating from my filters when it comes to creating a list that I'm sharing with you. We are all always operating from our own filters. Reminder. Don't get mad at other people because they can't see it your way, because they literally can't always see it your way. They can empathize and sometimes sympathize, which I don't know is necessarily healthy depending on the situation, but they cannot see it your way because they have their own life, their own experiences, their own beliefs. Keep that in mind, right? So for me, the number 1 thing is honesty. Am I showing up honestly? And am I giving them room to show up honestly as well? Am I participating in an honest way? Now, that does not mean I need to tell everybody all my business all the time. No, that's not healthy. But am I who I am? Am I showing up honestly, or am I pretending? Am I speaking my truth from a place of love? And again, that doesn't always need to be shared. Or am I withholding because I'm afraid of judgment, or I'm afraid of criticism, or fill in the blank, right? So I always try to start from here. Am I being honest? If I want the people in my life to be honest, am I practicing and creating spaces of honesty so that it's a norm when they're around me? Am I being honest about who I am? Am I being honest with myself and others, right? So number 1 for healthy relationship for me is honesty. Number 2 I have here on my list is healthy communication. This goes in partnership with healthy conflict and being open, right? Because when we can communicate in a healthy way and we have created and cultivated a space of healthy communication, I know that it's safe for me to be open and to share my truth and to do it from a place of love. And I'm going to do it without attacking because I've practiced healthy communication. And I know my partner in this relationship, whatever that dynamic is, also has room to do the same, right? Healthy communication is really important. And I have some previous videos on healthy communication. So if you go to my page and you type in communication, you're going to get a couple of videos on healthy communication. And when I started learning how to communicate in a healthy way, it literally changed every relationship in my life. I'm not kidding when I say that. For the better. And people who were not willing to participate in the healthy communication are no longer in my life. And that's a benefit too, right? Healthy communication is such an important piece of developing healthy relationships, and that includes healthy conflict and being open, right? Okay, the third for me is safety and consent. Am I safe in this relationship emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and sexually? Am I safe in this relationship? That's really important. And then, am I asking for consent versus just kind of throwing myself on someone? I remember back in the days when I was not a hugger, and I want to give a quick shout out to my daughter because her encouragement got me out of my comfort zone, and now I am a hugger. But back when I was not a hugger, I remember I was at this event, and this guy came over and just put his body on my body, and I lost my mind. And not only did I shove him off of me, but I went up one side of him verbally and came down the other side of him and just went in about how you do not get to put your body on anybody else's body just because that's where you are and you're comfortable enough, especially a man throwing his body on top of a woman. Because how many times have women been told, smile, sit on his lap, why are you being like that, why are you doing that, right? Oh my God. So I lost it on this dude. Now, what's really important is that I did eventually apologize. We're going to talk about that in another video. I did eventually apologize, not for what I said, but for my tone. And I did, because I felt disrespected, I disrespected him because misery loves company, and that is not healthy. So I apologize for the unhealthiness of my delivery, but not for the messaging. He then said it gave him insight to realize he can't just throw himself on other people. He had never even thought about it. He needed to ask for consent. Can I give you a hug? And when someone said no, he had to practice not taking it personal, and instead would go, they're not where I'm at in terms of physical hugging, handshake, or high five, or a fist bump. And the more that he practiced that, the better he got at it and the less he took it personal. So I'm not super excited about how I handled that, but also like there was a lesson learned and I said what I said, right? Safety and consent, really important in a relationship, any relationship. When my daughter was little and we would go to family events, the encouragement of people who knew us would say, tell her to kiss her uncle. No, she is not comfortable kissing her uncle. She don't know that man. And I'm not telling her or teaching her to violate her own physical space and safety to appease a grown-ass man. He needs to work through his feelings. The answer is no. Or maybe not a grown-ass man, anybody. No. If she doesn't want to, the answer is no. I'm teaching her how to trust and respect her own intuition, her own knowing, and to create boundaries accordingly. And if y'all can't handle it as adults, I know the number of a great therapist that can help you work through that. Okay, so that's 3. 4, trust. Trust is something that needs to be earned. It really, really is. And it's earned through consistency. You can't just show up on the scene and then 2 weeks later be like, I can't believe you don't trust me. Stop it. Stop. It needs to be earned. It needs to be proven over time. And it takes time. So if you are someone who gets really upset that people don't trust you right away, work that out with your therapist. Trust is something that needs to be earned over time, which means that in a healthy relationship, you have to be willing to invest the congruent and consistent time and congruent and consistent practices that will allow trust to be earned. And then the reverse is also true. Am I allowing space and am I showing up consistently in ways that allow trust to be developed? Trust. And in trust, also some subcategories of trust is flexibility. Being willing to be flexible and recognize that you're dealing with a whole other person. And so sometimes it might not be exactly the way you want it, how you want it. And if you have a problem with that, again, I know the number of really great therapists you can work that out with. And independence. Every person in a relationship should have a life independent of that relationship, or parts of their lives that are independent of that relationship. It's really important and necessary to make sure that that one relationship is not your end-all, be-all relationship. There are 8 billion people on the planet for a reason, and not every single person in your circle needs to like or get along. Just saying. Trust, independence, flexibility. Okay, that's 4. 5. Having boundaries, knowing how to set boundaries, and then honoring boundaries. We're going to talk about boundaries next week because that's a really important topic, especially for young women who have been taught to violate their own knowing and go kiss your uncle, right? So having boundaries and then honoring the boundaries of the person that you're in a relationship with. I posted a video on Instagram about how my daughter set a boundary and it both checked me and I was so proud. That's 5. The next one is taking responsibility and being accountable. So am I willing in this relationship to honor the fact that I don't always get it right, that I'm going to make mistakes, that I might hurt someone's feelings, either intentionally or unintentionally, and that I'm willing to learn and grow so that we can continue to learn and grow in our relationship? Am I willing to take responsibility, and do I give them room to hold me accountable? Now, as important as that is the reverse also true? And is the person that I'm in this relationship with willing to hold themselves responsible and to be held accountable, right? And then again, if we're practicing honesty and healthy communication and safety and trust and boundaries before all of that, then I know that when someone's coming to talk to me about something that I need to be held accountable for, they're coming at me from a place of love, and it's not them surrendering their feelings or their own ownership of their feelings onto me as though I'm responsible for how they feel at all moments in time. Because I'm not. And you are not for anyone else, right? You hurt my feelings when you said this. No, your feelings were hurt when I said that because you have an underlying issue around X, Y, and Z. Did I know about that sensitivity and pry on it anyways? Then I should apologize for that. Did I know about that sensitivity and then I have nothing to apologize for, right? Like, it's an important unpacking, and it's complex. Relationships are beautifully complex because we are beautifully complex, and so is the person that we're in relationship with. All right, next one. Equality and supports. Oof. This idea of equality and recognizing that from each relationship, you get to define what that looks like in your relationship. If someone's love language is acts of service and it really does bring them joy to always do the dishes when they come over, don't feel like, no, I have to do dishes most of the time because is there some way that you are creating equality? It might not be the dishes, right? But there has to be something that you're doing. And then how are you providing spaces for support for each other so that you're meeting these spaces of equality from a space of support, which is next level magic. And not all relationships know how to get there, and there's not a lot of practice around that, but it is a really necessary part of a healthy relationship that continues to grow and flourish, right? 8 is affection and appreciation. Showing affection, and if you're someone who did not grow up showing affection, go to therapy. Feel like there's a pattern here? Yeah, because there is. Go to therapy. Work through your stuff. Acknowledge it. Say it out loud like I am getting better at, and then create a practice for yourself. Even if it's a text message, even if it's leaving a note, create a practice where you share affection and appreciation with those in your life. It's really important part of us as a collective, as a community, to figure out how to share love. And it can look different from person to person, but it should not be withheld. And when you share it, it does not make you weak just because it feels vulnerable. It actually makes you stronger because you're being honest, back to the top of the list, about how you feel and your truth. So yum. 9 is giving each other room for growth and celebration, meaning I told her one time, I don't know why she doesn't get it, and she did it again. How many times did it take you to learn that lesson? That's not the point, isn't it though? So we need time and room in order to learn and grow, and in order to constantly remember this new lesson. And we almost have to make the mistake again and be like, oh, yeah. Oh my gosh, I realized. I didn't even remember, right? It takes time. Growth takes time. And in a healthy relationship, we give each other room. And if I'm showing up again consistently and I'm holding space in that way, I'm going to keep showing up like this. And it's only a matter of time before you figure out whether or not you're going to fall into alignment or not. And if you're not, that's okay too. Over a certain amount of time, I am going to learn about your pattern versus your pattern versus, oh my gosh, what's the word? Potential. And I'm going to make choices accordingly, right? But we have to give each other room to grow. And we have to celebrate each other when we recognize those moments of growth, and not just in terms of our relationship, but if someone gets a